Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey.
Did the daylight saving transition cause some damage to people's calendar?
Always.
Hey guys.
Let's end this today. Not sure if we can do all the client updates. Yeah, does anyone wants to give a client update first? Jimmy?
Hey, hello. From the Lighthouse side, we don't have a lot to update this week. We've been working on other priorities preparing for our release, so we haven't made much progress this week. We've got some refactoring happening on the syncing bit, but we haven't made significant progress. Hopefully, we can make some more progress in the next week. But yeah, we're still working on sync at the moment. But not much elsewhere. That's all from our side.
No problem. And then Kiku.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, from Teku side, Dmitry has been rebasing Teku to Petra, but he didn't manage to complete it before his vacation, and said that he needs another week probably to complete this. From my side, I'm doing different optimization, refactorings, recently removed that silly thing like for sampling, like retrieving samples from database and validating them again. So I just yesterday saw that pop PR notice. Yeah, that makes sense. That's it from the side.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm from the Nimbus team. There were a couple of issues that we tracked down during PeerDAS DevNet 3. One of them was there were times when the Nimbus BN would boot and the CSC param inside metadata wouldn't get populated. This was an issue actually raised both by Prism and Barnabas during the DevNet 3 run. This was one. The other issue that we had during the DevNet 3 run was there were often some times when we were broadcasting reconstructed columns, but there was a proof and commitment length mismatch, and possibly some client must have uh, picked it up and still accepted via gossip or something. Um, I think it caused a little bit of breakage in the network, but uh, in spite of that, I still found Lodestar, Teku, and Prism to be fine. So that issue is fixed as well. Um, so this primarily happened during reconstruction, and it was a very like niche reproduction. It didn't happen all the time, but it happened sometimes. So coming to that, I actually tracked down another issue Nimbus was having. So Nimbus actually maintains something called a quarantine. So it basically is like an in-memory cache, which keeps the sidecars against blocks that have not been processed yet. Now, since Nimbus was reconstructing directly from the database, like reading and writing into the database, there were often times, let's say when we received block proposal and we didn't receive all the columns against that block, maybe due to some reason. In those times, even if our database was populated with those reconstructed columns, our quarantine cache kind of kept on crying that some of these columns are missing, and turns out it like kept crying for a few epochs, and it kept root requesting other peers, and probably it is a possible reason for us to get downscored. So I tackled that issue by basically enabling reconstruction right from gossip. So right now, if a supernode, let's say, receives enough number of columns directly from gossip validation, it keeps trying to reconstruct rather than later reading from the database and then writing back. This way, we don't have any inconsistency between the quarantine cache and the final database, like all the columns persisted in the database. So that was the other issue. Apart from that, I have been actually doing some experimentation along column syncing for the supernode, which basically involves attempting to reconstruct uh, columns against a block index. Let's say if you just received 50% and up via a range request from another client, you don't need to rely anymore. So you try to reconstruct and populate it in the database, populate the rest of the columns in the database, and thereby proceed with syncing. Uh, I think I would want to keep this feature specific to DevNets because there are occurrences when we are receiving bad columns. But in practice, I don't think we would trigger this reconstruction while syncing that often. And lastly, so Nimbus doesn't really have a proper way to handle soft forks. So what we are trying to do is, since there has been some talks in and around activating PeerDAS at Fulu, we are currently integrating the Fulu fork in Nimbus Unstable, and we are planning to activate PeerDAS at Fulu right now in order to somewhat decouple some of the Electra code and the PeerDAS code, like keep it separate for now, right now, until and unless there has been uh, some finalization from EF or like all of us. So currently our design states, like, so we'll be using the same branch for both Spectra and PeerDAS, and we would really like to trigger PeerDAS at Fulu. If so doesn't happen, if let's say if the kurtosis config still says that let's trigger it at some EIP 7594 fork, our plan is to pick up that, like, parse that number from the config and replace it with Fulu. So we'll be faking Fulu because there is no other foolproof way in which we can basically have a soft fork going on in PeerDAS. So that's pretty much updates from Nimbus over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, that's pretty much from my side as well.
Thank you, Agnish. So next one would be Prison. Nishant has the flights to take it on.
Hey guys, yeah. So on our end, we're basically just fixing some initial sync issues. So there was a bug on Prism's end, serving full nodes. So we have patched it on our end. We've also done some big optimizations to patch column verification. So that's done. So now Prism can sing, large amounts of data columns, in less than a second rather than 30 seconds. That was the case before. On rebasing on top of Spectra, it already works for us. So if you run Prism with the Spectra DevNet with PeerDAS, we should be okay. Last I checked. Yeah, that's all.
Would fork activation on Fulu would be working for Prism also?
So this would be a new fork, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot trickier because if it's a new fork, would you have the state having a new fork version?
Yeah, so we would have a new fork version. At least that's what Nimbus is pushing for.
Yeah, that's a lot more work for us. Because it would essentially be, setting up everything from off, and you need the state transition to, transition the beacon state from Spectra to Fulu.
Agnish?
Yeah, but like, I have a question. So like, when Prism was working like on PeerDAS as Deneb, wasn't the beacon state Deneb? And now that it's Electra, I'm not like sure how Prism is handling PeerDAS. Like, I mean, if the beacon state was Deneb and still PeerDAS worked, and then the beacon state was Electra and still PeerDAS worked, shouldn't it still work for Fulu? Like,
No,
yeah.
but you're asking for a new state transition. This is not like simply Spectra and we have a soft fork at the Fulu fork. This is basically, yeah, you have to add in a new fork version. And once you schedule that, you have to do like a bunch of other things. So it's a lot more. Yeah, it's a lot more work than just having a soft fork.
Right. I mean, okay. Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Next one would be Lodestar.
So can you provide with the context? I joined late.
Now we're just doing the client update.
Yeah, sort of we haven't worked on it since the last time. So yeah, not much update from our side. But with regard to get blobs, so we were talking that get blobs will also be useful uh, in PeerDAS, but I think that get blobs might not be as useful over there because with my get blobs experiment, the hit rate is like 80%. It's never 100%, and for you to reconstruct the data columns that you need all the blobs, because a data column is a column slice across all the blobs. So yeah, but apart from that, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Do you have anyone from branding here? Okay, and did I miss anyone? Okay, thank you. So next we will talk about the definitely updates. I think we could start with the updates from Barnabas. Tell me us about the current definite progress.
Yeah, so DevNet 3 is pretty much dead. We had a over 100,000 slot reorg from Prism side last week, in the end of the week. I don't think we can realistically recover from this, so I'm proposing to shut it off today. And we need to start discussing DevNet 4 timelines, I think.
Oh, thank you. So the document is this one, right? I just post it in the chat
Yes.
for the. So yeah,
So the DevNet 4 spec would probably include the rebase, unless people want to have another DevNet before this, which is the same spec as DevNet 3. The thing is that the two branches are getting further and further apart, so we should do the rebase, I think, as soon as possible. And I think most client teams are focusing on delivering Pectra right now. So it might make sense to take a month off from having a PeerDAS DevNet and just focus on working on the rebase and then launch PeerDAS DevNet 4 once we have Pectra DevNet 5 ready to go, and then build it on top of that, possibly with a fork activation at Fulu. So that way we can have both words ready. So that would mean that PeerDAS DevNet 4 would probably launch around the end of November, possibly a week or two after we can launch Pectra DevNet 5. And ideally, we would activate PeerDAS with Fulu at that point. Yeah, I think most teams will be in DevCon. That's why I don't expect to launch in like the next 2 to 3 weeks, anything. The question would be if client teams would be ready to do DevNet 4 in the end of November, assuming that they would also need to implement a new fork. A new fork transition, I mean, with Fulu.
thank you, Barnabas. Does anyone have any suggestions or objection? I think I would agree with this plan, like to have a more comprehensive full DevNet instead of like pushing things rush before DevCon.
Is it fair to assume that we want to activate PeerDAS at Fulu? are all the client teams okay with kind of hard coding that? Because that would actually assume that we want to include PeerDAS in the full upgrade pretty much 99%.
Is there any other feature scheduled for Fudu at the moment?
EOF, but no CL side, as far as I know.
Yeah,
I mean,
just maybe
that's an
surfacing
always
the
change. Yeah.
just surfacing the discussion that's also just happening on chat. So if we activate on Fulu, essentially how we would handle testing is, so there's EOF that activates on Fulu as well, but we would just use, for example, Nimbus stable for EOF testing, and we activate Fulu there, but Fulu means nothing for Nimbus stable, for example, but it does mean something for the EL fork. So the EL will activate EOF, and the CL will basically use whatever Electra is. And in the PeerDAS world, we can activate Fulu as well, but we'll use get stable, for example, and get stable will just ignore the Fulu fork because it has no logic, and it will continue with whatever we've defined in Petra. And whatever the CL client is will activate PeerDAS. So we're just essentially agreeing to use different branches for different testing, as long as the client ignores a fork that it does not recognize. So that's the one behavior we need. So if a CL fails, when we provide it a fork and it doesn't understand it, then we would have to fix that behavior. But otherwise, I think we're okay.
Are we sure that ELs can ignore forks?
We'll have to sanity check this, but I know get ignores it, for example.
Okay.
But we will have to sanity check this.
Yeah, I know that CLs would ignore unknown forks. I have verified that already.
Okay, perfect. Then we should be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's essentially the one behavior we're agreeing to today. Everything else we can sort out with using different images or Genesis generator or kurtosis configs. But that behavior is something we're agreeing on. And I think by the time we hit DevCon, we should just agree on which version, like which spec release of Petra we want to base stuff on, and just target that release for a longer duration of time, because I'll assume there's going to be more Petra spec releases, and if each time you have to update multiple code bases, that might be harder.
I think we should already agree to be DevNet 5, Petra DevNet 5 spec, which would include 7742, because we would potentially want to mess around with different number of blobs. So ideally, all of that would be based on top of that.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't see us needing to target anything earlier than that.
Right. Okay, so guess technically for CL, like including to Blue with only PeerDAS features, like easier for us and somewhat make the code base cleaner. But it seems it's better to have a double check at ACD with the ELs. Is that correct, Perry?
Yeah, I guess double checking with ACD does kind of make sense, because this essentially commits to PeerDAS as the next fork. I mean, we can always change that, but yeah, we're essentially saying PeerDAS is full, which we have agreed in paper earlier, but I don't know if we've made a strong commitment.
Okay. Yeah. Let's double check at ACD. Okay, we have still, now we have more weeks for the definite, so we included more small PRs. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going back to the chat. So Barnabas suggests that we can discuss 7742. Yeah. So I
Yes.
think it is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it would be good to discuss how we want to actually activate the target and the max blob per block. Whether we want to keep the legacy values and then just introduce a new one with Electra and then Fulu, or whether we want to do change the already existing name to Denab prefix or postfix. As far as I know, config values should not be renamed. So there was some pushback to rename existing config values. So it's probably just better to prefix them or postfix them with new fork name.
Yeah, so like after the request, we'll go through again to see if this yeah would reflect impact the, I mean this EIP will impact the current PeerDAS feature. I think that would be included with this max blobs per block change. But like yeah, and I think I reply in the Discord that I think we will not change the current DNAP configuration. So like we will do the traditional spec writing way, we add the prefix to the or suffix to the parameters, which would more redundant, but it seems the safe solution to represent the fork changes, unfortunately.
Is there a reason that Denab was not included in those names previously? Or was that just a mistake?
No, just when one configuration first time created, it doesn't have any prefix. But when it is updated in the next fork or other forks, then we will add the prefix.
But for example, the max blobs per block, that's not a value that is actively being used. That was added 4 months ago only. So I don't understand why we could not add the nab for this value. That is listed under denab, but it's not actually denab. I think the client just made an error including it under denab.
Was it a preset earlier and was moved to config?
Yes.
Okay.
But as far as I know, it's not being used by any client teams.
Yes. So if it's the sorry, I think for the block max block, that one would be PeerDAS only. But if there are like some other parameters, that would be if this is the new ones, then it would be, we will have to add such a suffix. Like, so I'm checking is like target block per block. Target block per block, is that the DNAP configuration?
The target one is also not DNAP configuration as far as I know.
Like all of them are like block, sorry, PeerDAS only.
I don't think we have a target config even set. And what I mean is that the max blobs per block is not a config value that is being actively used by anyone. It used to be a preset, and then 4 months ago during Kenya, we discussed that it should be a config parameter, and Deplion made a PR, the 3817, which introduced it as a config parameter. But as far as I know, nobody has actually used that config parameter till today. So it's not likely that it matters what it's being called. We could just rename it to being a lecture, max blobs per block a lecture, or max blobs per block denab 6, for example.
But like max blobs per block, that one was a DNAP used one, right?
No, it's not. That's my point.
It was a preset earlier. Now it's a config. Yeah. So it actually hasn't been released on mainnet anywhere.
It was added 4 months ago, and we already had the NAB 4 months ago.
I see this. I mean, the max blobs per block, that one was using the DNAP P2P protocol spec.
As a preset, not as a config.
I see. So,
So if we introduce it as a config, we might as well introduce it as a config with the proper name, with the DNAB name in it.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe client teams can chime in on that, because I think moving from preset to config is easier than moving from preset to config as well as renaming. I guess we can take that discussion to Discord.
I think just probably we put it to configuration so that client teams could have more flexibility to tune these parameters for the local definite also. But this now it became fork parameters, which make it probably less configurable. But I don't know. That's as far as that, like we can continue the discussion at Discord. Okay.
Yeah, I think another point I want to raise is we want to avoid renaming those preset configuration because it's also a breaking change for users of the beacon node, because beacon node serves an endpoint that returns a list of configuration of the current node. So if we change a config, it would be, I mean, if we change a config name, then it will be a breaking change.
But do you actually return this value as a config?
I
Because this
don't
was
know
a
if,
preset before. So I don't think this is returned by any consensus layer client. That's my point.
yeah, I'm actually not sure about that. I can double check.
Okay. So let's check the spec, check the client information, and then get back on the Discord. Sorry. Let's go back a bit to the definite PR discussions. So also, like, I think Pop added one item on the agenda. Pop, would you like to give an update on that PR?
Yeah. I want to bring the decouple thing, the decouple subnet thing back to the discussion. Like, yeah, it seems like everyone in the PR like is convinced already, like that okay is somewhat useful. Maybe, yeah. Is there any like opinion or comment before we can probably like merge that?
Indeed, many the client devs have this appetite to include this refactor to the DevNet. Anyone has any suggestions or comment? If not, we can get back to the PR GitHub discussion later.
Yeah. And also I have another PR is about like because currently we don't standardize how we keep the data column sidecar like in the store, and it turned out that there are some issue in the spec. Like, for example, we cannot make any assumption on the on what is inside the store. Like, for example, what is the data column sidecar that is kept in the store is already valid or not. So yeah, so this PR is about like standardize it, like to make sure that every data column sidecar that is in the store is already valid. So maybe you can take a look in the PR.
Thank you, Pop. Barnabas?
Sorry, I just forgot to.
Cool. Do we have any other like features, PRs discussion? Hey, Katya.
Hey everyone, can we discuss quickly metrics?
Sure.
Sorry, can we discuss metrics?
Yes.
Yeah, I will quickly share the latest PR we're discussing and metrics as well. So we have 2 points to discuss. Do we need to use milliseconds or seconds for runtime metrics? We've discussed it already in the chats, so I would like to hear from the clients. There is a concern from Prism that there should be more granularity for histograms and for runtime metrics. So milliseconds would be preferable. What do you think? And these metrics will go to Sato and will be used by research teams as well. At least some of these metrics. Currently, Lighthouse uses seconds. And Prism uses milliseconds. So we need to agree what we're going to use. Is Jimmy here? Oh yeah, Jimmy. Could you please comment?
Yeah, we would have a strong preference. So if millisecond is preferred, then we're happy to change our existing metrics, I guess.
Okay, then I guess anyone else? If not, I guess I will turn it to milliseconds. And the second question is single or batch verification. As far as I got it, it's the way of optimization and the clients do it in different ways. So it's kind of difficult to compare. Maybe we can leave these metrics for monitoring, not like for comparison, if it's not possible, but for monitoring. Barnabas, how do you think? Because some clients use only batch verifications, some of them use batch, but in fact it's single. So yeah.
Who is reporting that it's doing batch but doing single? Because that sounds like a mistake.
It's in this PR. If you go down, it's Tersek and Matthew. We were discussing this in the PR. So the last message. So the client's concerned that it's not possible to compare this implementation batch verification. I know that it is important for research team because we discussed it with Miguel Labs and yeah, so I don't know. I would like to hear from you. Do we need to continue work on this metric? Prism team, unfortunately, not here. Copy paste. Okay.
I actually have a question. So I think I don't understand what is single seconds and batch seconds, because if we are using the same C API, then I think the only public function that is exposed is verify KZG batch, I think. And I think in that case, we would just use batch seconds and not single seconds at all. I mean, I'm not sure how other clients do it, but this is actually what we do. And I did confirm it from Justin. He said that single verification is not probably exposed, so I'm not sure how clients actually use that function. So yeah, or maybe I'm getting it wrong totally. So I just need some more clarification on this.
Yeah, that's what I would like to hear from clients as well, if anyone uses single verification.
Yeah, so for Lighthouse, I'm just having a quick look now, and I think maybe the issues from our side because we actually use the single metrics, but under the hood we're actually calling the batch verification function. So maybe that's where the confusion come from. So we could just change our metric to use the batch times and remove the single times.
Any other clients? What I hear now is it's only batch verification, so probably we can skip this single.
I think we
Jimmy?
are all. Oh, he has something.
Sorry, I think I just raised my hand by accident. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think we are all constrained to use batch verification because we don't have access to the single verification function that way, like how CKZG is exposed. So I don't think unless somebody uses Kev's library, I don't think we have access to single verification.
Okay. I think if anyone is agrees, so we can skip the single verification.
I think single verification just got removed from the API, so it's just not available.
Okay, and as for batch verification, does the implementation differ much or not, or it's how it is implemented in the clients? Can we say that we can compare it or not?
For the functions themselves, they should be comparable.
So probably,
I think the only I think the only difference is CKZG calls a separate single verification function in itself, like in the batch verification exposed function, and probably Kev does everything in one function. Like that's probably the only difference. So I don't think it's I mean technically it's comparable only. Yeah. Pretty similar, yeah.
So let's try to implement it and we'll see the results, if they differ dramatically or not. So the other group of metrics is gossip submetrics, and the main concern is how to counter unfiltered received messages. Do we need to count invalid messages or not? Because some of the client filter them like even before this counting. So that would be nice to hear as well, how you implement this filtering. Is it possible to to count unfiltered messages, and do we need to count invalid messages or only valid messages duplicated?
Sorry, Kaya, I missed that. Which particular metric are you talking about?
Yeah, sorry, I will quickly copy it into the chat. So we are talking about this received counts unfiltered. So it means received gossip messages. The discussion about it is also in the 13th PR. I think it's Prism team. Unfortunately, the Prism team is not here today, so it's a little bit confusing to discuss it. But just it would be nice to know how you count, if you count, how you implement this filtering part. So do you include invalid messages or not include if we're talking about counting these messages? Is it possible to implement it in the same way? Agnish, could you comment?
Yeah, so I think what you're like suggesting is at the high level, once we run gossip validation, you want a count of all the messages that failed gossip validation, but just at the high level, right? Because it's like it'll be really difficult for us to do it in the libp2p layer because there are duplicate messages firstly, and secondly it's because like nim libp2p is just not Ethereum specific. It's used by others, so we would have to maintain a branch if we would want to count invalid messages in the libp2p layer as well. That would be like very like intense hard work for us. So I think what you mean to say is in the app level and not in the libp2p layer, right?
So we don't need to count invalid messages like separately. So we just need to agree if we count all the messages, including valid and invalid, in this duplicated metrics. So, because yeah, it depends on implementation.
Dustin, can you care to comment here once?
Sure. I think very briefly I'll say, and I know I've been very, let's say, outspoken in that PR, but I don't actually have anything necessarily against. I think the idea of counting duplicate messages, say, it's fine substantively. I don't have anything against that per se. It's a process concern. It is exactly the way Agnish is describing, that these are not Ethereum specific libraries, and it creates either engineering issues or sort of, let's say, political tensions, like pushing, like, does Ethereum try to almost colonize libp2p? In any case, to standardize on metrics that require libp2p based on a process that we in this room are not very many people compared to the people who are use libp2p overall. And so so my concerns are, broadly speaking, process oriented, as maybe how I'll want to frame it. I do want to clarify, I'm not really against any of these metrics as such. I mean, I think some of them are dubiously useful for reasons I say. I mean, the gossip messages have sort of near constant multipliers between, the bytes and counts, but things like that are sort of side concerns. But that's sort of what I'm trying to get at, I guess, in that PR.
Do we need this unfiltered metric in general?
I think this is primarily useful to see how much duplicate you're getting. For example, recently we've been looking at the net metrics, and we're seeing a lot of usage on the blob topics. And with this metric, we're able to see that we're actually getting like the same blob 5 times for every slot on average. So that's the use of it, like to see like how much duplicate we're getting. But I don't know how I don't know whether this would be something that every client wants to add, because it might be a bit difficult if it's in the libp2p layer.
The question is if we can deliver PeerDAS without the metrics. Because at this point, we have so many different forks and different issues that without the metrics, I feel like we are kind of blind in like what is happening. So I'm really hoping that by pushing all the client teams to implement these specific metrics, we're going to have a bit more oversight in what is actually happening in PeerDAS, and like which columns are received by which peers and which columns are provided by which other peer. So it's really about, do we actually need this, or is it a nice to have? And I feel like we should focus on the metrics that are an absolute must and possibly make the other ones optional. We just have to decide which ones are an absolute must.
Yeah, so I think apart from metrics, the one thing that we can do, and I have seen this in a lot of Lodestar logs, is that Lodestar logs out the ETH to agent, like basically the client, the guy who is let's say requested something or sent something via gossip. I think we should all have that at least that thing enabled in PeerDAS logs. It just eases out the job a lot. Otherwise, we just need to again continuously like filter out peer ID and all these things. So I think ETH to agents is something like, or like not just agents, we name it as ETH to agents in Nimbus, but like who is who, I think just getting that on the peer like logs would be really, yeah. Gajinder has like agreed to that as well, yeah. Because it just makes it just makes life very easy to debug. So yeah, if I have to ever interrupt some really specific function, I would definitely go with Lodestar, because Lodestar just tells that I am the culprit if I am the culprit really. So yeah, I mean, I think all the clients can try to have something like this in their logs.
What about graphs? I mean, we can use these metrics for Grafana dashboards, for monitoring, for a long time monitoring. because as far as I got it, sometimes dashboards help to find the bugs which are not obvious in the logs. Well, we have a lot of logs, so it's difficult to follow them all.
I think the duplicate messages or the metrics integration, I think it should be readily taken forward by clients who can afford to do it right now. And I think that would, in general, give us enough exposure to what is going wrong in the devnets. Oh, yeah. Even if like 2 or 3 clients have it in their implementation, I think it's still a win.
Yeah, I agree. When we have like the summary dashboard where we have 2, 3, 4 clients, it will be more obvious how it can help. So I think that's it for metrics. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we ending this call, do you have any topics to discuss?
Are we planning to have a PeerDAS discussion in DevCon in 2 weeks?
I mean, for this call or a more in-person
In person.
meeting? I see.
Yes, I think that will be a
Sure.
sorry. I think there will be a PeerDAS session and then a PeerDAS session in the 2 days that we had before. On the times, I think.
I guess we can probably cancel this call in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, probably makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes, yes. We should. Oh, need to have some in-person meeting during the DevCon, before DevCon, and hope to see you there. And yeah, we'll cancel the call on the 12th.
So then the next call
Any-
would be on the 26th?
Yes, or we can move 1
Yeah, I
week
think that makes sense.
earlier.
No, I can leave it on the 26th.
Okay, so it's probably the week that we will finalize the definite implementation scope, hopefully. Anything else?
Yeah, I might have like an extra topic to talk about. Now that you guys mentioned about duplicates, we did like previously an analysis of gossip sub duplicates per topic. My question is like, how are teams now supporting R1 messages on their current versions? We would like to rerun the experiment to see how or whether there was a reduction in duplicates, but we still don't know how teams are catching up with this implementation. Like I know that Teku, I think, deployed it. Lighthouse, we discovered that Lighthouse was doing it in a little bit naive way, but I think this has been already merged as well. Could you guys do a small update on that sense?
Yeah, from Teku side, Teku deployed it, but it's now in master, so we need to rebase on Pectra to get it. So in PeerDAS, in our PeerDAS branch, we still have no, I don't want.
Any other comments?
Yeah, but I will say that it will be really valuable to have this implemented before deciding whether we want to increase the block target. In the sense, like the expectancy of the duplicate reduction, I would say that it's high, but without numbers to prove it, it's kind of like blindly picking. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to rush anyone, but yeah, at least to have a clear view of what's the current status would be appreciated by other teams as well.
For Lighthouse, as you mentioned, we didn't have the optimized version in the previous release, that the PR to optimize has been merged, and it will be in our next release. Probably going to be released in a couple of weeks' time. So I think it'll be useful to test that out, or even with our current unstable version, which already has it.
Any other comments? Okay, if not, then I think that's it for today. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you in Bangkok.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.